Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another lesson in English Home Language. Today we're going to be looking at paper 3, which is the writing paper. And before I say anything else and before we continue, I want you to know that we are looking at, since we're looking at writing, I hope that you've all got some paper. As you see, I've got a pad, you've got a pen, and you're ready to participate a little bit today, because I'm hoping that when we're talking about writing, we can actually do some writing. We're not going to be doing a lot, but certainly at certain points it's going to be important that you're participating by writing, because in many ways the only way you can get better at writing is by writing, and we can talk about it, but I'm really hoping that we can practically engage in some writing today. I see that we've got a number of learners from Scotstoun, and I'd like to welcome you guys. It looks like there are a number of you who are together and working together, and so I'd encourage you as you're listening, like I said, to participate, just to talk to each other, to make sure that everyone's got a piece of paper and you guys can sort yourselves out there, and that would be fantastic. Before we do anything else and talk about paper 3 and this exam that you're going to have to write, or that you would have written already this year in the June exams, let's just think about this gentleman over here. Now, I assume all of you would recognize Jay-Z. I was trying to think of someone that would be fairly well known and fairly popular. And the reason I've thought about Jay-Z is for the following reason. We're going to imagine a scenario. Now, a scenario is, a situation that, isn't necessarily true, but could be true. So I want you to imagine that the following could be true. And I might expose my ignorance here about whether he has or hasn't been to South Africa, but anyway. So I want you to imagine that Jay-Z is coming to South Africa. Okay, and if you don't like Jay-Z, that's fine. Think of anyone that you would really like to go and see in concert. The person, I'm going to just say Jay-Z, but you think about the person whom you would most like to see in concert. And at this point now, if you'd like to SMS me who you think that might be, you're welcome to. But let's continue with the scenario. Jay-Z has decided to give away Golden Circle tickets and a backstage pass, or backstage passes, to 10 school students. Okay, so he's coming to South Africa, and he thinks he wants to meet some of his fans, and particularly some of his teenage fans. And so he says, you know what, I'm going to give away some Golden Circle tickets and backstage passes, so after the show they can come and hang out with me, and I can chat to them. However, the way this works is that you have to submit an application. You can't just sort of send in an SMS and say, I want to be considered. There's a form or something that they put together, and you have to fill this in and send it in, and then either Jay-Z or his team or someone will sit down and go, okay, let's look at what this person's written. That would be a good person. Let's give them a Golden Circle ticket and a backstage pass. So you've got to hand in your application. Now you're really quite excited about this. Whoever it is, it's Jay-Z or someone famous. You fill out your application form and you go to where you have to hand it in, and the person taking it from you says, oh, these were due yesterday. The closing date was yesterday. And you suddenly realize your opportunity has escaped you. You should have handed it in yesterday, and you're thinking, why didn't I check the date? You thought you had. And what you decide to do, though, is you decide that you are going to take a pen and you're going to take a piece of paper, and the person behind the counter or wherever says, look, I can hand it in, but there's no guarantee that they'll accept it. You think, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pen, piece of paper, I'm going to write a note. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach it to my application form. And on this note, I'm just very quickly and very simply going to appeal to the people reading my application that they should consider my application even though it's late. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to write something that says, please accept my application, I know it's late. Now what I want all of you to do, and we're only going to take a minute to do this, I want you, where you're sitting, you've all got a piece of paper, okay? All of you have got a piece of paper. I want you to imagine, while I'm talking now, start imagining, you've got your application form in your hand, you're handing it over, you realize that you're a day late and you desperately want this. This is your one opportunity. You want that Golden Circle ticket. You want that backstage pass. Your only chance to get it now is to write a note that you can attach to your application form that will somehow persuade whoever's going to read it to accept your application. So you've got to think very carefully, what are you going to write down that you're going to attach to your application form? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time you for a minute. You guys have got a pen in your hand and you've got your mind on the go, and you are going to write down the note that you are going to attach, staple it even, to your application form that you hope someone will read before they just throw your application into the bin because it's late. You want them to look at the note and go, okay, and put it in the pile so that it can be considered and you might be able to get that ticket. So here we go. You've got a minute. I'm going to write with you. You start writing now, and we're going to write together. You can watch what I'm writing if you so desire, or you can write your own thing. So, how much time do we have? Oh, half a minute. Okay, they're going to want you to hand it in just a moment. Okay, mission is late. I've forgotten. I didn't check the right dates. Please. Okay, we're going on a bit of a minute, but we've got a bit of extra time. Keep on writing if you need to. Please accept application. No. Is my hero. Thank you. Okay, so let's pause there. If you haven't quite finished, we're going to return to that a little bit later. I want you to take that piece of paper, just put it to one side, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes. After we've had a look at what we need to do for the paper 3, and you'll see why I got you to do that later. Let's talk about the paper 3, shall we? Okay, goodbye, Jay-Z. Hello, paper 3. And let's talk first of all about the structure of the paper. So you'll know your paper 1 is out of 70, and it is 30 marks, I think, comprehension, 10 marks summary, and et cetera, et cetera. And there's 10 marks on language, and there's visual literacy and so on. Paper 2 is out of 80, and then you've got 30 marks on poetry, 25 marks on novel, and 25 marks on essay. Not an essay, I beg your pardon, on drama. Your paper 3 is out of 100, which immediately tells us that it carries more weight than the other papers. In fact, it makes up 40% of your exam mark. So paper 3 is really quite important. And a lot of people would say you can't prepare for paper 3. Well, we're here today because I want to tell you a little bit about how you can prepare. And also to say to you that one of the best ways of preparing, or certainly you can't be preparing properly, I think, unless you're actually spending quite a bit of time writing and practicing writing, because writing is an art, it's a skill, and you wouldn't expect someone who is, even someone who's got a naturally brilliant voice, not to go for voice training, or you wouldn't expect, Lionel Messi, who's a wonderful football player, not to practice. Of course he practices, even though he's naturally very good, but you only get good at something by practicing it, and writing's the same. So right at the beginning, let me say that if you want to prepare for your paper 3, listen to what we're talking about today, but spend some time actually writing, and I'll give you some strategies about that later. Anyway, back to the paper 3. It's out of 100 marks, so we want to take it seriously. It's made up of 2 sections, Section A and Section B. Section A is out of 50 marks, and it's 1 essay. And you'll know that it includes narrative, descriptive, argumentative, discursive, reflective. It's got, I think those broadly speaking are the 5 essays that you're going to write. Now, what we're not going to do today is talk about Section A at any length. All right. So I'll touch on it a bit later. And certainly, can I just remind you guys, if you've got any questions, the folks at Scottsdene, you've got the advantage of, there are a lot of you can think of some questions together, fire them through. They're going to show up here, and if I can at any point address those questions, then I want to do that. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on Section A. Okay, it's 50 marks, it's important. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on Section B, which is also out of 50 marks. It's 2 essays, and each essay is 25 marks. And that's the section called Transactional Writing. Now, transactional writing, broadly, as a category, is different to the Section A. So it's a different kind of essay that you're being expected to write in Section B. And certainly, if you've got your telematics booklet, which I hope all of you have, you'll see that in that booklet there are 12 different types of writing that are discussed. And on the screen there it says 12, but I suspect in your booklet it says 13. Let's just make sure. No, it's 12. So in your telematics booklet there are 12 different types of writing. Those are them there. So if you want to, you can turn to page 18. There's an introduction to transactional writing, but then from page 19 onwards, each of those pieces of writing, so there, for example, if you're looking at page 19, there it is over there, that's the first section, letters and emails, and we'll look at that in a moment. If we just have a look at the slide, you'll see it's number 1, writing an email, then the friendly and formal letter, number 3, and so on and so forth. I don't need to read through it, you can see it there in front of you, and it's in your booklet. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at those types of writing which you get in Section B. They're very specific types of writing. But again, what we're not going to do is go through every single one in detail. We just don't have the time. And I think I can be of more use to you, and our time together can be more helpful if I speak to you about, aspects of writing that relate to all of those 12. Okay, so, I'm going to talk about something that is relevant, or things that are relevant to all types of writing. And then what we will do, though, is we will touch on specifics. In fact, let me give you this to help you just understand where we're going in the next sort of 35, 40 minutes. Okay, we're going to talk about, first of all, something called the 3 R's, and I'll explain that in a moment. Then we're going to look at format. We're going to look at subject lines, and you'll understand what I mean when I get to that. Introductions and conclusions, register, and specific text. Now, please don't worry if you didn't get all that, and don't spend time now writing all of those down. What you need to know is that there are 6 things that we're going to talk through. But I want to create time for you to send in your questions and to do a bit of writing and for us to use that time in that way. It's slightly unusual because this is normally just, spending most of our time speaking to you, and I will spend most of the time speaking to you, but if you can respond to me, that would be very helpful. So let me put this out here at this stage. What I want you to think about, and we're going to return to this later, is I want you to imagine that I need to write a speech or I need to write a letter. And the situation could be anything. But what I'm going to ask you to think about as we're going along, and I'm telling you this now so that if you think of something, you can send in a message and I can see it here and I can do something with it. Okay? So this really relies on you guys sending me something. If we have a look at that again, it's called open topics. It's where, if you imagine I have to write a speech or a letter, I want you to answer 2 questions, and this is what you would message through to me. I want you to think about who, okay, so for whom am I writing? So who am I writing a speech for? Okay, who's my audience? To whom am I writing a letter? So who could I be writing a letter to? Okay, so for example, do I need to make a speech to your school, or do I need to write a speech for me to speak to a sports team, for example? So I want you to think of who am I writing a speech for, who am I writing a letter for? You can choose one of the 2. And then again, why? What is the reason that I'm writing? So if I'm writing a speech for, let's say, a sports team, and it's the end of the year and you're looking back over the year, the reason why I'm standing up and giving my speech to the sports team is I'm looking back over the year and I'm giving everyone a chance to remember all the triumphs and the disappointments and, how we developed as a team. And, it's meant to, people are meant to laugh and people are meant to cry or whatever it is. Let's say that I'm speaking, I'm writing a letter to the bank, for example, and I'm writing to the bank to say, please, I haven't paid this money for this reason. Please be patient, I will pay it. Or perhaps I'm writing a letter to someone who's advertised a job. It's up to you. I want you to think about someone or some people for whom I'm writing a speech or a letter, and I want you to give me a reason why I might do that. Okay, and I'm going to take my lead from you. So if you send me something, we're going to use that a little bit later. Okay. So let's talk now about what I call the 3 R's. And I'm only going to take a few minutes about this, but this is, I think, very important for you to understand. Because whether you're writing a letter, whether you're writing an email, whether you're writing a speech, whether you're writing a dialogue, whatever you're writing, these 3 R's are very important. They matter. Okay, and so I've given you 3 R's because then you can remember it. You go R, R, R. Okay? The first one is reader. Whenever you write something, you are always, at some level in your mind, thinking about who's going to read it. Am I correct? You're writing something and thinking, okay, someone's going to read this. So let's just go back to this for the time being. This is my letter to the people regarding Jay-Z. Because, man, I really want to go and watch Jay-Z. I'd like to shake the man's hand, and I'd like to be right in the front when the concert is on. So I've handed in my application. It's a day late, but I'm going to attach this note here because maybe this will help, that they'll think about my application. So let's have a look at what I wrote. Now, I deliberately didn't think about what I'd write beforehand. Okay, obviously I thought of the idea, but I didn't think about what I was going to write. So just like you, I put you on the spot. I said, write a note, and hopefully you did. Think about this. How did you start your note? Okay, what did you say up front? I started off, Dear Jay-Z. And then I suddenly thought, well, is Jay-Z going to read it? Or is it someone who works for him? Is it perhaps a little bit too formal? Is it too relaxed? I don't know. But I'm thinking, who's going to read it? Jay-Z or someone else? Okay? And then I crossed out Dear Jay-Z because I thought maybe it might be better to write something more formal. So I wrote, to whom it may concern. And I wrote, to whom, because I don't know. You only write to whom it may concern when you don't know who's actually going to receive it. As we'll see later with the letters, sometimes people start off with to whom it may concern. But if you're writing to the editor or the manager, you know who the letter's going to. So it's only if you're sending it off somewhere and you genuinely don't know who you're sending it to, you write to whom it may concern. Now, let me ask you, if I'm writing this letter, do you think it's a good idea to write something like to whom it may concern? Should I be more personal, maybe? Does this sound a bit formal? I don't know. It's up to you to decide. That's what I was thinking as I wrote. What did you write? Okay? And if you'd like to, you can, at this point, you can send me a message and tell me, how did you start your letter? And you can talk about it. Okay? And don't just talk about it amongst yourselves if you're all in one location, but sort of put it out here so everyone can hear, even those people who are watching in other locations. Okay? Then on I went. I started off, I said, I'm so sorry that my application is late. So I thought, look, you know what? I made a mistake. They told me what the date was. They said the date is the 23rd of June, and I handed it in on the 24th of June. So I'm thinking, you know what? I should start my letter in a way that shows I'm taking responsibility. So I said, I'm so sorry that my application is late. Now, you might want to start your letter by saying, please accept my application. And you might say that's the first thing you say. Okay, but again, what I'm trying to illustrate here is who are you writing for? Who is your reader? That's the first R. Now, what was going through my head when I wrote this note here, and perhaps it was going through yours as well, is you're writing to someone who has a certain power, and you want them to use that power to help you. Okay, I'm writing to someone with, someone who I know they could decide, they could either take my application and go, nah, and throw it out. Or they could go, oh, here's an interesting note. I'm so sorry that my application is late. Okay, all right, okay, this person realizes they made a mistake, and they realize that they're speaking to someone who can do something about that. Let's just take the first one here. I've got Konwaba, I think, who's written in and said, I started my letter by Dear Sir, Madam. Now, that is a very good way to start, certainly a formal letter. And thank you for sending that in. That's very helpful. When you write something like, and I'm going to write it on the big page here, just for a change. When you write something like Dear Sir, Madam, okay, this is when you would, if you're writing something to, this is a formal way of starting a letter, okay, this is, I think you guys know that you wouldn't write a letter to your friend and say, Dear Sir, Madam, because your friends would say, you know, my name is whatever, Konwaba, okay, so don't call me Sir, Madam, it's not necessary. But if you're writing to someone that two things, if you're writing to someone that you don't know, okay, so let me make a note of this so you can maybe write this now. This is a question you need to ask yourself, is do you know the person? This is a good question to ask. When we're talking about the reader, do you know the person? Because if you don't know the person, you want to remember that this is the first time that they've heard about you. They don't know you either. So you can't start your letter, obviously, with, how's it? Okay? Or awe, or whatever, because they don't know you. So it's very familiar. That's how you greet your friends, because you know them. Okay? And you might or might not greet your parents by saying, Dear Mother, or Dear Father. But that's quite a formal way of greeting your parents, and you might feel comfortable with that, you might not. A less formal way would be saying, Dear Mom, Dear Dad. Okay? But the question is, do you know the person? In this case here, with whoever's going to read the Jay-Z letter, I don't know them, and they don't know me. So what I want to do is I want to show them that I understand that they've got, something that I want, and that's a golden circle ticket. So Konwaba writes, Dear Sir, Madam, and that's a very good way of starting a formal letter. And the second question, which I've already mentioned, this is the first one here. The second question is, what authority or power does your reader have? Okay? Because imagine this. Let's say that, I don't know how many of you would be old enough to drive, but let's assume you got a driver's license and you're driving down the road and a traffic policeman stops you and says, you were speeding. And they give you a 300 Rand fine, and you think, oh my word, I can't pay this fine. So what you do then is you sit down and you write a letter to the traffic department in which you say, look, I was given a fine on this day. I can't pay this fine. Please would you consider releasing me from this fine or reducing the fine, because I can't pay you 300 Rand. Now, in this case here, you're writing to someone who's got very real power over you. They've got authority. So you can't just write a letter and say, how dare you fine me? You people don't know what you're doing. What right do you have? And they'll say, well, I'm a traffic policeman. Of course I have the right to fine you. So they've got authority. They've got power. So when you write to them, you want to be very careful about how you write, because you don't want to come out and be arrogant. You want to show that you're being humble, and you want to show that you respect their power. That's very important. If you don't know someone, question number one, and if they've got authority or power, number two, it's very important that you show respect in your writing. And whether or not, and guys listen to this, whether or not you actually respect the person is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Because you want something by writing to them. Okay? You want them to reduce your fine. You want those tickets. So you're going to be respectful, because if you're respectful to someone, they're more likely to give you what you want. That's one way of thinking about it. So, by writing Dear Sir, Madam, what you're indicating, first of all, is that you're trying to be formal. Okay? What you're also indicating is that you do know perhaps the person's position or authority, so maybe they're the manager of a company, or they're the editor of a newspaper. But what you're also indicating is that you don't actually know the person by name. Because if you did, you might say, Dear Mr. Shabalala, or Dear Mrs. October, or whatever you'd say. Okay? But because you don't know them, you say, Dear Sir, and you put in the slash, okay, or the dash to indicate, it's not a dash, I beg your pardon, let's just say it's a slash. It's either a man or a woman. So you don't know. So you write, Dear Sir, Madam, and it's probably best to capitalize it. So Dear Sir, capital S, Dear Madam, capital M. Because you're showing you don't know the person, you know what position they have, what authority they have, and so you're trying to sort of show sort of two things there. Okay, and so saying Dear Sir, Madam, very good. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's actually go on to the next R. So that's the reader. You want to be aware of who you're writing to. The second thing is you also want to be aware of why you are writing what you're writing. Okay? So you know who you're writing to. You want to be clear about that because that's going to influence what you write or how you write it. And you also want to know what has caused me to sit at a keyboard and type, or to pick up a piece of paper and write. Okay? So in the previous example with the Jay-Z concert, it's very clear that your reason is that you want to get tickets and you want to get a backstage pass. Okay? And so let's have a look at what I wrote here. I said, to whom it may concern, which I think is probably not the best way to start off that. It sounds quite formal. And then I said, I'm so sorry that my application is late. I didn't check the right date. Please, please, please accept my application. And there is actually an exclamation mark there. Let's make it very clear. Jay-Z is my hero. Okay? So what I'm doing there is I'm trying to sort of think about who I'm writing for. And I'm hoping that they're going to take it easy on me and they're going to go, all right, you admitted you made a mistake. And what I'm doing is I'm being quite honest here as well. I'm saying this was my mistake over here. I didn't check the date. But then I go on and I say, please, please, please accept my application. Now, it's very clear the reason that for which I'm writing. I want them to accept my application, and you can see it here. This is perhaps I'm explaining something that's actually already quite obvious to you. I'm saying, please accept my application. There's the reason there. That's why I'm writing on this piece of paper. Okay? And also the reason is Jay-Z is my hero. Okay? This is someone I really, really want to meet. Okay? I'm assuming Jay-Z is a good person to use here. If you've got anyone else, again, feel free to suggest that. So you want to be clear about why are you writing. So I write to the traffic department because I don't want to pay 300 Rand. I write to a company because they're offering a job and I want that job. Okay? And that brings us to the third R, and it's similar to the second R because it follows from the second R. What is the response that you want from what you're going to write? So you're going to write something to someone for a reason. What do you hope is going to happen as a result? Do you want them to read what you've written and go, and throw it away? Or do you want them to read it and then do something? And typically speaking, when we're talking about transactional writing, often what we mean is someone's going to read what you've written and they're going to do something. So I'm writing a job application so that they will give me a job. That's the action. I'm writing a speech so that I can inform people, or I can entertain people, or I can help people to celebrate. Okay? I'm writing something like an obituary because I want people to remember. I'm writing an application because I want, to be accepted for something. I'm writing an agenda, or I'm writing minutes of a meeting because I want people to know what happened in the meeting. So they can look at it and they can, okay. So those are the three R's. The reader, who you're writing for. The reason, why are you writing. The response, what do you hope will happen as a result of your writing. Okay. So I hope that's clear to you. I wanted to try and give you something sort of relatively simple to remember. If you've got any questions, please fire them up on the screen here. I've had one response so far, and that was very helpful. Now, I don't know if any of you have thought of a person to whom I could write, or for whom I could write a speech, and a reason for that. Remember I asked you at the beginning for that. Let's just refresh our memories. that there, someone to write to, or a speech to write for someone, and a reason for doing it. So why would I be writing a letter, or why would I be writing a speech? So you can keep on thinking about that, and feel free to message me. Let's go back here to what we'll cover. Let's talk now about format. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about with regards to format is going to be pretty brief. But you need to follow what I'm saying here, because there's a good reason for talking about format. Okay. When we're talking about format, we're talking about the way that you would write a certain piece of writing. So let's have a look in your booklet. Let's go to page 22. Okay, the example of a letter to the press. Okay. Now, if you're writing a letter to the press or a letter to the editor, there is a very specific format that you need to follow. There's a very specific way that you need to lay things out. So, for example, and if I could just get the camera to focus on this here, you'll see here for the letter to the press, and let's just move this out the way because this is going to get confusing. Right here in the top, I've got my address. So that needs to be there right at the top, and what I need to do is write it in a nice straight line all the way down. I then need to leave a line, okay, and there's the date as well, okay, so address, date, leave a line open, and then I'll write the editor, okay, the name of the publication, in this case the Tatler or the Cape Times or whatever it is, the address of the publication, and then I leave another line, and then I write the topic line, or what we could call the subject line, okay, that's what I'm going to refer to it as later. And then I leave another line, and then on I go with my letter. And I finish it off with, at the bottom, you'll see here, I write what I want to write, and then I leave a line right at the end. I write yours faithfully. I put in my signature, whatever it might be, boom, and then I write my name. I print it nice and clearly at the bottom. Okay, and you'll see that these are very good notes that you've received. And so if you're wondering, how do I write a letter to the press? Turn to your book, to page 22, to that example, or turn to page 21. It'll tell you exactly how to do that. So guys, when we're talking about format, we're saying, what is the way in which you need to lay it out? If you want to write a dialogue, you can't just write it any which way you choose. You need to make sure that it's set out very clearly. And so, again, let's look at that. If you turn to page, for your dialogue, or play script, let's find a good, okay, so go to page 31. And if you have a look at the bottom there, looking here, it looks like this over here. Page 31, it refers to a play script. And so you'll see, for example, if you're wanting to write a play script, you can't just write it sort of however you want to, okay? You've got to write the names of the people who are speaking. So there's Timmy, and then there's a gap that's maintained the whole way through. And you go over, and if you're writing some sort of action, then you write it in brackets, you put a colon, and then that's what he says. Then you leave a line, and then it's the next person. And then if there's something in brackets there with a colon, you start it there. And everything's nice and sort of lined up there. And if you go into the next page, you see it continues, top of the page. Can you see there? You may think this is really obvious, but these are the kinds of things that people get wrong, and they needn't get wrong, and they lose marks because of this. This is the format that you're expected to follow. Okay, there should be a nice, even line there. You should leave a line between speakers, and so on and so forth. If you're writing a dialogue, that's the format. If you're writing an informal letter, there is a format to follow, a certain way that you've got to lay it out. The address goes there, the date goes there, you write this there, you write yours faithfully at the bottom, and so on. Okay, so you want to be aware of the format, and you don't want to make silly mistakes in things like letters, okay? Because letters are very popular forms of transactional writing in the exam. So if you want to have a good chance of making sure that you know that you're writing a good transactional piece, because you remember there are two, make sure that you know how to do your letters, because letters, very often come up. And if you know just simply, before you've even written anything in the letter, if you simply know where the address goes, where the date goes, what you say at the beginning, what you say at the end, you're sorted. And then you're not going to lose marks at least. Okay? And again, I refer you to page 21. If you're looking, for example, how to do a letter to the press, it explains it over here. And that's compared to, how to do a business letter. And that's a very helpful resource to have in your booklet, and all of you should have that. Okay. So that's format. Now let's talk about the next item, which is subject lines, number 3. We've talked about the 3 R's, we've talked about format. Let's talk about subject lines. Now, let me explain it this way. Let's assume that you're running a company. You're busy. Okay. Let's say you're running a restaurant. Okay. And you receive a letter. You look through a number of letters each day, okay? Because if you're running a restaurant, the person who sells you meat is writing to you, or the person who is supplying your furniture is writing to you, or the person who's supplying your vegetables wants to write to you. And you've got people applying for jobs because you need waiters and waitresses, and so they've sent in their application. And you've got people who want to work in the kitchen, and they've written to you. So you're sitting with a whole pile of letters, and you're a busy person. Now, what you don't have time to do is to sit and read through every single letter to find out what it's about. What you want to do is you want to look at the letter and very quickly, within the first few seconds, go, okay, that's a letter about food. That's from the people who sell me groceries. Okay, that's about meat. That's also about food. Okay, this is from someone looking for a job. This is from someone looking for a job. This is from someone who's, from Telcom or Escom, or people supplying my electricity. Okay, another person applying for a job, more about food. And so what you can do is you can start to sort the letters. And you know how you can do that is because if someone has written a good formal letter to you, what they've done is they've given you not even a sentence, but just one line which tells you what their letter is about. And at a glance, you can go, there we go. I know what this letter is about. So let's turn back to page 22, and this is the letter to the press. If you're the editor of a newspaper, gosh, you're a busy person, so you can't sit and read through every single letter. So what you expect people to do is to write a topic line. Have a look there, or a subject line. And now what you can see, this person, this is a long letter. If you look down the page, it's a long letter. They've got a lot to say, obviously. But I know within the first few seconds of me reading this letter what the letter is about. It's a protest against proposed shopping mall near Newlands Forest. Now, let's say I look at that and I go, oh my word, I've had 10 people writing in about that. You know what, we don't need another one, and I throw it out. Or I say, oh, okay, we've got 5 people, let's see, maybe this is the best letter. Then I can put it into a pile. But the subject line is very important. Have a look, page 21. I beg your pardon, not page 21, page 19. Okay? If you're writing an email, you guys will know this if you've ever written an email, that there is a subject line. Now what this does, the subject line does, is it indicates very clearly to whoever's reading the email, oh, this is what it's about. And so you don't need to read the whole email, you can just read the subject line. Okay, so when we're talking about subject lines, let's just have a look at that again. We've looked at the 3 R's, we've looked at the format, we've looked at the subject line. When we look at the subject line, it's all about, in an email or in a letter, it's telling you what is this thing about. And so that's why it's so important that you have your subject line. And as you'll see in your booklet, typically what you do is you underline it, okay, to indicate this is the subject line, read this. Okay, what's the next thing? Let's talk about introductions and conclusions. And I'm going to try and be very brief on this one. It's really important how you start a piece of writing, and it's really important how you end it. Okay, if you're writing a letter, we've seen already, right at the beginning, people need to know what the letter is about, and they need to know what you're going to be talking about. Okay, and when you conclude the letter, it's really important that you leave them with a clear idea of what you've been talking about. Okay, so let me give you a few basic principles. If you're writing a letter, so let's just talk about letters for a moment. If you're writing an informal letter, let's say, for example, on page 20, okay, I know people don't really write letters terribly much these days, and you guys might be more used to, SMSing or BBMing or WhatsApping or whatever it is, okay, or Facebooking. But if you sit down and write a long letter, have a look at this letter on page 20. Everyone turn there. It's an informal letter. It's a friendly letter. It's not, you're not writing, Dear Sir, Madam. You're saying, for example, it says, Dear Miranda, or whoever the person is, okay? And then, again, there's a format. Guys, pay attention. There's a format. You leave a line after that. Okay? And then you, typically, the way that you would start a friendly or an informal letter, and keep this in mind because this will, if you do this in your paper 3 exam, it shows that you're aware of what you're doing. Typically, not always, but usually, if you start an informal letter to a friend or a family member, you start off by showing an interest in the other person. Okay, so you could start your letter off by saying, "Dear Miranda, I've just come back from a holiday to the beach and it was incredible and I swam with dolphins and you know what, I lay on the beach the whole day and suntanned and, oh, how are you doing?" Okay, you want to show an interest in the person to whom you're writing to show that this letter is not just about you. So for example, in this one here, the person, Gillian, who's writing the letter says, "Thank you very much for the beautiful card and flowers you had delivered to me for my birthday." Okay, showing appreciation for what the person's done for them. And she might go on and say, you know, "I'm so glad to hear that you got engaged," or, you know, "Thank you for, you know," or "It was wonderful news to hear about your brother, you know, having a baby," or "I was so sorry to hear about your mom's illness." But show an interest first. That's an introduction that's important in your informal letter. And typically you'll finish off an informal letter. Your conclusion would be something like, you know, "I look forward to hearing from you. Please write soon. Please send my love to everyone else there. Please send my love to Uncle Ralph and, you know, Auntie Kathy, and, you know, I hope that they're well." And then you wouldn't say "yours faithfully," because that would be formal. You'd write "with love" or "your friend" or whatever it is. Okay. So introductions, think about how you start and think about how you end. And again, it's who are you writing to? Reader. Okay. And then following on from that, number 5, I've talked about this already, but let me just explain to you what the word register means. It's a fairly technical word, or a big word for something quite simple. Register refers to your reader. Are you writing to someone who you don't know or is in authority over you? Or are you writing to someone that you do know and someone who is your equal? Okay, someone who's got the same sort of authority as you. Or are you writing to someone who is perhaps younger or someone who is in, you know, less authority than you? Because that determines what's called your register. How do you write to the person? So if you're writing to the president of the country, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to think, wow, this person, I don't know him, and this person is in a position of authority, and so your register is going to be very formal. However, if you are writing to your friend, your register is going to be very informal. It's how formally or informally do you write. Okay. Now let's have a look what I'm going to do in the time that's remaining, and I see there are no questions as such. So what I'm going to do is just talk about the different types of writing, the different types of texts, and just see and just make a few points. And what I'm going to do is try to draw on my experience as someone who's marked a number of paper 3s. In fact, this is my 8th year of teaching. I've been marking paper 3s throughout, so I've read thousands of paper 3s. Okay. And some of the same mistakes kind of keep on coming up over and over again. Okay, there's certain things that people do that, you know, every time I look at it and I think you should avoid doing that. So let me take you behind the scenes a little bit and try and sort of talk to you about things that in some of these different types of writing that I think you should be very aware of. Okay, so let's talk about the letter to the press. And here's something that I think is very important for you to remember. If in your paper 3 you are given the task of writing a letter to the press or a letter to the editor, and it's one of the options to choose, and you think, I like that topic, I'm going to write a letter to the editor. Here's something that I think you really need to keep in mind. The editor of the newspaper can do nothing with your letter except publish it. Let's say, for example, you're writing to your local newspaper about crime in your area. If you write to the editor of, say, the Cape Times, and you say, the crime in my area is shocking, the editor of the newspaper can do almost nothing about the crime in your area. All the editor can do is publish your letter so that other people know how you feel. And then, what happens is that someone else who lives in your area reads your letter and goes, I agree with that, and they send in a letter. Or someone else in your area says, I don't agree with that, and they send in a letter. But each time, it's not like the editor has a magic wand and can go ding and sort of magically change the situation. So don't, and this is what people do sometimes, is they write to the editor and say, you should do this. Okay? And don't do that. Don't do that, because the editor can't change what you're writing about. The reason that you write to a newspaper is because you've got something that you feel passionate about, and you want other people, people who read the newspaper and the public, you want whoever will read it and whoever will hear it, you want them to know your thoughts about this. So you're basically, by writing to the editor, you're saying, this is what I think. And hopefully other people will read it and go, yes. And that might inspire them to do something, even if just to kind of type into the newspaper and say, well, this is what I think too. And who knows, maybe you'll change something by that. But the editor can't change anything. So don't write to the editor and say, you should, because they can't do anything about it. Okay. And my apologies to the editor of the Cape Times if they can, and they're a magician, but I don't think they are. All right. Let's talk about writing a dialogue or writing a play script. And so you can find this on page 23. If you have a look there. Okay. Now, the thing that I want to bring your attention to, and I'm just going to take a sip of water quickly, is when you're writing a dialogue or a play script, there's always a balance between two things. Okay, on the one hand, speech, and action. Okay, so let's have a look here. In this here, if we'll read it together, there's Timmy, and this is what Timmy is saying. But it says here, Timmy, and then in brackets, it says, nervously clearing his throat. That is an action. That is something that Timmy is doing, not what he is saying. That's why it's in brackets, okay? So it's important that you make that distinction. If you carry on reading, it's here. It's this here, this bit here. Hi, Jenna, I am glad to find you alone. That is speech. That is what he is speaking. And if you carry on reading this play script, what you'll notice is, let's just be sure of this, if you read that whole thing, what you'll see is, roughly speaking, and this is just very roughly speaking, at least, I would say, let's just give a figure here. I would say at least 60% of what you write should be speech, and 40% should be action. In fact, you know what? I think 70%, most of what you speak, so I'm going to correct myself here, should be speech and maybe 30% action. So what you don't want to do when you're writing your dialogue is have a long description about what people are doing. No. The whole point about writing a dialogue, the whole point about writing a play script is it's all about what people are saying to each other. So most of it needs to be speech. And every now and again, you can write something like nervously clearing his throat, or Timmy walks over, it doesn't have it written here, but you can say, Timmy walks over to the door. Fine. But don't do that's only a little bit. Most of it is speech. So make sure that when you finish writing your dialogue, that most of it is speech. Okay. And let's talk, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. We can't cover all of these. Okay. And let's just go back to, where was it now? Right, let's go to the agenda and minutes. Because if you're wanting to do this is a quite a tough piece of writing. But let me just explain it to you this way. If you're writing an agenda, you're writing that before a meeting. What you're going to do is say, in the agenda, this is what we plan to do. If you write the minutes, you're saying, this is what we actually decided to do. Okay, so the agenda and the minutes are quite a tricky one, so think carefully before doing it. But the agenda is before, and the minutes are afterwards. And let's have a look at another one. If you have a look on page 24, we've got the obituary. Okay, and so that is when you are writing about someone who has died. Okay, and an obituary is meant to be a way of helping people to remember who this person was, and you're celebrating their life. So obviously when someone dies, it is a sad occasion. But what you want to do is you want to, and have a look through these notes here, they're very good. You want to remember specific things that the person did, and even more, who was that person? They were a husband, a father, a brother, a grandfather, a friend, and you want to mention all of those things. And that's what you would do in an obituary. So those are just a few of the types of writing that we're looking at. Grade 12s, remember, with your paper 3, there is no substitution, if you're preparing for it, to write, and to write a lot. And get hold of past papers. You can get this from the Department of Education website, and practice writing letters, and practice writing narratives, and practice writing descriptives. Okay, and take that time to do it. Build it into your study timetable. Okay, and ask your teachers to read it. Ask each other to read it, and practice that. Okay, Messi isn't a great player because he just dribbles the ball. He practices. You want to be a good writer. You want to be a better writer. Practice it. So grade 12s, I hope that's been helpful, and I wish you all of the best as you prepare for your paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3. And I hope today equips you to do that. All right. Go well.